So thank you very much for having me. My name is Haley St. Dennis, and I'm with the Institute for Human Rights in Business. We're a nonprofit, think and do tank, we like to say. We try to be very thoughtful about our role. We're not activists, but we're not corporate cheerleaders. We're critical friends. We share our research as public goods, built on trust and dialogue with business, government, and civil society. And so today I'll try to give a sort of big picture overview of what just transitions are. We're only going to be scratching the surface really, but if I can get you interested and excited, that's a very good outcome for me. And in terms of my message today, what I'll reiterate throughout, and what I want to leave you thinking is that the train is leaving the station. So the task ahead of us is one of decarbonizing to build a cleaner, greener world, but while we're at it, a fairer one as well. And even before COVID, numerous intergovernmental reports showed that the most corrosive impacts within and between economies was growing inequality. So we're living in a deeply unequal world as well as an overcarbonized one. And those things together put justice right at the heart of the economic transitions needed to achieve net zero. So transitions will rightly start with energy and energy use, but no sector will be unaffected. And that especially includes sectors like yours within the transition to a low carbon economy. And so in terms of what just transitions are, it has been defined over the years in a variety of ways, from like for like energy replacement to approaches integrating procedural and distributive justice for more structural reform, all the way through to really transformative approaches that envision a complete overhaul of the political and economic systems that are really seen as driving the climate and inequality crises. So as we've already heard from Bettina and from Anna, we're at this point where there's tremendous uptake of a very visionary concept, but not yet with a really single definition. And so until there are clearer norms and standards around it, from my perspective, it's best to think of it as a pathway, to first think really ambitiously about the outcomes we're collectively targeting: low or zero emissions, guaranteed social protection, decent work for all, poverty elimination, and thriving and resilient communities. And then work backward from that to chart your path as a company, as part of a wider ecosystem of actors as well, and what that path should be to make the concept of justice within this conversation real. And so just to dial into a little more specificity, there's 6 points summarized on the screen that I would consider essential elements to think about. Context, a risk to people approach, not limiting your focus only to workers, ensuring your planning is integrated as well as holistic, and sharing your learnings. So first on context, every transition is going to be multidimensional. Transitions will be happening at different times, at different levels, and at different rates, requiring action from a concert of different actors. And so just transitions is really a contested space, and it should be, because every transition is going to have local history and politics forming the backdrop. So it is all about practice on the ground. No one is looking for more lofty commitments or nice words on paper. We really want to see the hard, quiet work on the ground of trust building with potentially affected stakeholders. Really asking yourselves the question constantly, what it means for those stakeholders to have agency in the decision-making processes that are going to transform their lives. Second, preventing risks is an essential first step. And we've already heard this a little bit throughout the day. Just transitions is not just a matter of creating new jobs or ad hoc local programs. First and foremost, a risk to people approach must be embedded deeply into your company culture, systems, and relationships. And the UN guiding principles are the established global baseline here. So the bottom line is, unless you continually assess your risks, your involvement, and take appropriate action, we're just trading one crisis for another. Climate action for social breakdown. And that includes subcontracting. It does not cancel out your human rights risks. It's not someone else's problem. It only changes the way in which you're involved in impacts. Third, and very related, make sure that you're taking a holistic approach to how you look at stakeholders. Just transitions has been pioneered over the years and decades by the trade union movement. So workers are a fundamental group that stands to lose or gain a great deal depending how companies and governments choose to transition. But there are also many other stakeholders at risk, and communities and consumers must be central as you make your plans. Fourth, full spectrum transition. We've already heard that this is not just a transition out of coal problem. The transition in is very much the other half of the transition coin. IHRB's patron, Mary Robinson, just issued a few days ago a very direct call to action to the transition mineral industry. So I really encourage you to read her remarks in Project Syndicate. The bottom line there is that doing well on cobalt, already a tall order in human rights terms, doesn't mean that impacts on other commodities you're involved with are somehow less. So it's also that holistic approach across all commodities. Fifth, planning is everything. In the mining sector, this really means a life cycle approach to planning. So closure needs to be planned in from the start. Selling off assets to less responsible companies, defer, divest, these are major targets for scrutiny and backlash that are only going to grow. And a related area also drawing economists, academics, policymakers' focus is previously abandoned assets and the social remedies needed to make those right to host communities and to workers. So finally, in terms of essential elements, we are all very much just learning together what just transitions means, and no one actor is going to be able to do this alone. So share your learnings fully and frankly. Emotions are high right now. Climate impacts are happening all over. Communities are not benefiting from the economic transitions happening on their doorstep. And we're operating in a world of very low trust. So addressing information asymmetries is really going to be essential to repairing that, and will pay dividends not just to those groups, but to your company as well. This next slide is sort of intentionally messy to really kind of encapsulate the tremendous global uptake that we're seeing in terms of this concept. And I won't try to summarize all of these, you can find them all online, but we are really starting to see a lot of pickup at the government level to establish national and local just transitions plans. Investors and banks own net zero commitments are facing major scrutiny, and many other companies across the transition out and the transition in are already communicating how they're understanding their role on just transitions. So lastly, just looking ahead, I'll sort of close by saying that this disruption is necessarily going to destabilize everything. And we don't yet have a coherence of approach across the ecosystem of actors that are at the center of this. Governments are at very different levels of maturity on just transitions. Companies are at the start of internalizing how they'll manage them. So from the IHRB perspective, guardrails are very much needed around what are currently all voluntary commitments to ensure we can have the confidence in them while we wait for governments to catch up and regulate and the international system to govern. We need confidence to know where we are on the journey so that we know how much more ambition is needed. And we need integrity to be at the heart of what it means to be on a transition pathway. There have been a rush of net zero claims, and in those claims have to be questions of justice, of rights, and of social dimensions of the journey. Can you make a net zero claim and be considered worthy or investable if it doesn't also relate to your company's commitment on free, prior, and informed consent or decent work? These are the kinds of questions IHRB will certainly be looking at in the time ahead. At this need for coherence, for norms and standards, we will be conducting inquiries informed by real-time transitions on the ground and trying to draw lessons globally across sectors and across the sort of supply, demand, and financing dimensions of just transitions. And we would absolutely welcome your engagement on that work. I'll leave it there, Anna. Thank you very much.